Hello, and welcome to the G&O Summer Road Trip podcast series, brought to you by the Fund for Our Economic Future. Each week, we'll hear a story of growth and opportunity from your communities throughout Northeast Ohio. I'm your host, Madison Scagnetti. I have with me today Fund President Brad Whitehead and Director of Communications Sara McCarthy, who are going to give us some background on our Fund's growth and opportunity framework and also the idea behind this podcast series. Brad, do you want to kick us off with some background on the G&O framework for listeners that maybe aren't familiar with our Fund's work?
Sure, Madison, and hello everybody. It's great to be with you on this podcast today. I suspect that most of you in Northeast Ohio, and certainly members of our fund, are familiar with the Fund for Our Economic Future, which is a collaboration of the philanthropic community here in Northeast Ohio who've pooled their collective time, talents, and resources to work on the economic vibrancy of Northeast Ohio. Our mission is to promote economic growth with equitable access to opportunity. And what that means is we're trying to make a successful and robust economy that works for everyone. We've been at this for, 15 years now. And in our early days, we were focused heavily on getting the economy moving and always wanted to have an inclusion as part of our efforts. What we found, though, is that over the last decade or so, we see that the overall Northeast economy has turned around, and I hope everybody feels like we're on a good trend here in the region. But what we've seen as well, though, is that economic polarization has been on the rise, and too many people have been left behind. So that caused us to ask the question and do the examination of saying, maybe it's not enough to have economic growth where we have inclusion fused into our efforts, but instead we need to be thinking about this idea of growth and access to opportunity as equal parts in the work that we do. And so that caused us to take a new and somewhat different look at the way we undertake our efforts here in the region. What that practically means is that we work on three interconnected areas in terms of an economic strategy. The first is job creation, and as we collaborate with partners around the region to shift from old line industries that have slow growth into newer industries that promise greater growth and more jobs. That's the first pillar of the work. The second is job preparation. So job creation and then job preparation. What job preparation means is that we need to make sure that the jobs that we're creating, we have people that are able to fill them. And what we've learned is that there is currently a gap between what employers need and what we have a workforce ready to step in and fill. And so the good news in all this is if we can have better matching between the skills required and the jobs that are available, we'll have a great deal more opportunities for our citizens. So we're doing a lot of work in the area of job preparation. And then the third leg, in addition to job creation and job preparation, is job access. And this is perhaps the one that is least intuitively obvious to people. Like everybody sees that we need jobs and we need to make sure people are prepared for jobs. But what we've learned in the course of our work is that where a job is also really, really important. And the patterns with which we've been growing here in Northeast Ohio have meant that more and more people are cut off from available employment opportunities, either because they can't get there on public transit or that the distances between where they live and where the job is located are so large that it causes the cost to be prohibitive. So against all this, we're working, and in that work, we know that philanthropy is just one player in this, probably a small player, but we need to collaborate with a lot of other people to get this accomplished. And I guess that's where Sara comes into all this, because as we have been advancing this growth and opportunity agenda, both within the fund and within the community, we know that we need to understand a lot better who's doing what, what's working, and so on, and that we also need to connect with more people to share the message. And so I guess it was a week or so ago, Sara came into my office and with the idea of perhaps collecting some real-world stories about what is going on, and perhaps doing it through the nature of this podcast. And then having such a talented person as you, Madison, we decided that makes sense to do. So with that, I'll get beyond my expertise really, really quickly here. So Sara, maybe I'll toss it over to you to explain the concept of what we hope to do with this series.
Thanks, Brad, and thank you, Madison, for kicking us off with this great G&O Summer Road Trip podcast series. As Brad mentioned, we thought that this would be another tool for our fund in helping us spread the message and the sort of the gospel of G&O to folks that are both familiar with our fund and those that have maybe heard of us but don't really understand what growth and opportunity means and what job creation, preparation, and access really look like in different communities in Northeast Ohio. And as our recent annual report highlighted, our fund really believes and sees itself as a learning laboratory, a place where philanthropy can come together to exchange ideas and learn from one another, see what is working in different parts of the community and implement those learnings into action, and then also share research and look to other communities beyond Northeast Ohio and learn from them to understand how we might advance growth and opportunity more effectively here. And so this podcast really builds on that concept of our fund as a learning laboratory, and we hope that through examples of growth and opportunity in the region that we can all learn from each other and further advance our missions together, further leverage our resources, and really leverage our impact. And so that's what we hope ultimately this podcast will help us do.
So I have to ask you both one more question. This is a summer road trip podcast series. What's the best summer road trip you've ever been on?
Best summer road trip. And Madison, that one's a no-brainer. I graduated from high school in 1978, and I owned a 1972 8-cylinder Gran Torino. And I jumped into that Gran Torino and first drove north to Chicago and drove my Gran Torino around the streets of Chicago. I grew up in a little farm town in Illinois, and then headed west all the way out to Colorado, bombed around, met a friend of mine who I had met along the way from Kansas. And through the course of that, I think I really got an appreciation of how diverse our nation is, how diverse people are, and frankly just had a ball along the way.
So this is a tough question because I love road trips and I've been on a lot of them. But I guess I would have to go with the road trip that I took 2 summers ago to Maine with my now husband. And on that trip, we got engaged in Acadia National Park. So I guess that has to be the best one.
Okay, Madison, it looks like you're getting ready to close. But before you do that, you got to share with us what's your best road trip.
So I have to say that the best road trip I've been on was with a group of students at Cleveland State. We went down to Oak Ridge, Tennessee to help with Habitat for Humanity, and it was a blast. Looks like our first podcast episode is coming to an end. Before we go, thank you both so much for being with us today and providing us with some really important background for this series. Thank you to all that are listening, and stay tuned for next week to see where our summer road trip takes us.